Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first Audit Committee meeting of the year. Before I commence, can I send out best wishes to Councillor Ritchie? I've just heard she's not well, so can I convey our committee's best wishes to her? Okay, do we have any apologies?
We do, Convener. We've got apologies from Councillor Patrick and from Councillor Spears.
Okay. Do we have any declarations of interest, either financial or non-financial, with regards to our agenda today? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Minutes of the last meeting held on 29th of October. Have we all read them? Do we agree? Is there any matters arising? Okay. Rolling log. I see there's only 2 items and we're going to be discussing the Legionella report anyway. Before I start the main agenda proper, could I hand over to Kenneth for an announcement?
Yes, thank you, Convener, and morning to everybody. I just wanted to make a brief statement in relation to Madison School. Firstly, on behalf of Falkirk Council, I'd like to apologise for the disruption caused to pupils, families and employees following the temporary closure of Madison Primary School. This significant decision was taken after thorough structural assessments of the building, following initial assessments of the stonework damage caused by Storm Aylwin. These identified a number of issues which could not be mitigated against. Pupil safety is our #1 priority within the Education Service, and so there was no alternative to the Council but to relocate pupils and staff to other neighbouring schools. Given Madison Primary School is only 17 years old, I have asked for a detailed, independent, external investigation to be undertaken so we can all fully understand the facts behind the issues we have encountered at the school. Until this has concluded, it will not be possible to provide further details, but I can assure elected members and parents that the findings of this report will be shared as soon as we have them. The works to Madison are likely to take many months to complete, and we will keep parents and pupils updated throughout. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Council staff for working exceptionally hard over the last few days, over the weekend, to ensure that provision was in place to relocate nearly 500 pupils to alternative schools in the local area. I would also like to thank parents and guardians for their understanding during what has been an emotional and disruptive period for them. Whilst we have no concerns relating to other schools, as a precaution, officers are commissioning intrusive surveys of all other schools which are of similar construction and were built in the same period to ensure that they do not have similar issues. We will keep elected members and parents updated on this in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now start with our order of business for today, the first being our annual governance statement. Amanda.
Thank you, Convener. The report today presents a mid-year update on the Annual Governance Action Plan, which includes actions identified when developing the Annual Governance Statement in previous years, which, as a committee will know, is included in our final accounts. And this report has already been considered by the corporate management team before coming to this committee. The Annual Governance Statement itself will come back to the committee as part of the accounts for 24-25, and that's a key document. So that supports the Council's strategic governance framework, and the action plan is critical in ensuring that the Council continues to develop and improve its governance arrangements. Progress on the action plan is determined through updates from officers, including the quarterly service assurance statements and quarterly corporate and service risk register updates. And groups are also required to complete their annual governance group self-assessments to inform the annual governance statement for the 24-25 accounts. There is a lot of detail in the current Annual Governance Statement Action Plan, and paragraph 5.3 outlines that the list of actions will be reviewed with a view to reducing the level of detail and minimising duplication. Paragraph 5.4 highlights the main changes to the Annual Governance Statement, and that includes removal of progress updates on internal audit actions, which are reported separately, and removal of health and social care partnership actions, which are reported to their appropriate committees. Appendix 2 provides a detailed breakdown of actions organised firstly by the SIPFA good governance principles and then by corporate risk. And an update is provided for each action alongside a red, amber, green status for the action and for the overall assurance level associated with the risk. At this stage, there's no risks that are rated as having no assurance or no actions where significant weaknesses and controls have been identified. There does remain a number of amber actions, so actions with limited assurance, and most of these have target dates for improvement or implementation most of them in 2025. However, there are some, for example, financial sustainability and climate change, which we've recognised in our discussions in the Corporate Risk Register are going to be much more challenging for the Council to implement and improve. Colleagues are here from across the Council to help advise on any specific actions and risks, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener, and thanks to Amanda for that initial presentation. I've got two particular questions, and one of them is related to the committee or the paper saying that the level of assurance for sustainable growth, economy and employment was to be confirmed. And it also states the same as it was this year. So why have we not been able to have that confirmed, and when will we be able to get that confirmed so that we know the level of assurance around that? The other question was at our last meeting there was concerns raised about building security arrangements, and is there ability to get an update on progress on dealing with that as well?
Amanda.
Maybe pass to, I'm not sure if it'd be Malcolm or Paul that might want to pick up the economic growth strategies and plans. So I think part of that is because we're reviewing the economic strategy, and so we're sort of waiting for the outcome of that, and so that that's happening during 2025, and then the board we've noted that the Community Planning Partnership Board are due to receive annual progress reports during 25-26. So I think some of the timescales are noted there in terms of the Falkirk Economic Strategy should be reviewed by next month. But as I say, Paul or Malcolm may want to give an update.
Through you, Chair. Can I ask Michael if he's got any further information, but it's possible we need to go away and seek that?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. We've been working very closely during 2024 with our colleagues in Clackmannanshire and Stirling Council. There have been a number of changes in the leadership, particularly in Stirling Council in the last 6 months or so. So as we are progressing the regional economic strategy, which was due in December, we have experienced some delays in terms of just finally agreeing the contents of that strategy, but working very closely with our neighbours in Stirling and Clackmannanshire, as I mentioned. So the plan is we are looking to have that strategy completed in springtime, bring that forward to members to agree that. And following that, we then commence the work directly on Falkirk's own economic strategy and progress that during 2025. So we have experienced some delays because of the change in leadership across Stirling and other areas, causing some delays to this economic strategy element. But we are working well with our partners on progressing that matter, but we are experiencing some delays.
On that, can we have a commitment that we still will have to be confirmed this time next year, that there will be quite a clear outcome?
Yes, through you, Chair. I'm relatively confident this year we will crack this. Yes.
Thank you, Malcolm. Michael, apologies. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. I have a couple of questions. First of all, in relation to the equalities duties, I'm really pleased to see that there has been an improvement in terms of progressing the equalities duties. That's smashing. But I am a little concerned about the fact that the mainstreaming report still shows a gender and disability pay gap rising for council employees. And it's a matter, I know it's not a matter that's not only for this council, but given that our first Equal Pay Act was 55 years ago, it's kind of a little worrying that we're still seeing problems of this sort. What assurance do we have, what confidence is there that we're going to be able to improve this situation?
Karen.
Thank you, convener. Convener, this is a matter that is under consistent scrutiny. We have a very well-established job evaluation panel involving both employees who are fully trained in job evaluation as well as our trade unions who are fully trained in job evaluation to sit on that panel. Through that process, there is a lot of work done to continue to ensure our job evaluation process is equality proofed. And we believe that to be the case. We monitor those statistics about gender equality. We continue to monitor them. There's also national statistics where we can see where other councils are in that respect. This is also linked not just though to job evaluation, it's about job segregation and how we can encourage females into male-dominated jobs and vice versa, males into female-dominated jobs. So there's a whole host of actions that sit in there to actually take some of that work forward. Our new equality monitoring and mainstreaming report is due to come to executive this, I think it's the first quarter of 24-25, and that will have an update on some of these issues as well as the next up-to-date actions for the council. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Another issue that is of concern to me here is in relation to health, safety and well-being and in relation to gender-based violence. We're talking about target dates of 2026. That seems to be, is there an issue about staffing? Is there an issue about the resources we have to deal with this? That the health and safety and well-being target has been moved from last year to 2026. And the gender-based violence is also September 26.
Thank you, convener. So on the health and safety actions, it be fair, we have very deliberately moved those. You will see elsewhere in the papers that we have had substantial assurance about our health and safety policies. There is a lot of good practice going on for health and safety. The reason we have moved the target date, though, is because we actually want to make sure that we get out and do on-site audits and inspections to look at how our guidance and our policies are being implemented and make sure those are appropriate. So it's not that we have that amber level of concern about our policies and practice. What we want to make sure is that on the ground it's being implemented and test that out before we would give council the reassurance on that particular matter. On the gender-based violence, we had a new employee who started last year with us, and we are enabling them to do a whole host of work. A lot of that comes through, I believe, the Community Planning Partnership as well, and there are action plans sitting within the Community Planning Partnership to enable that to be taken forward. But again, it's about allowing a lot of that to bed in with some new arrangements and new practices.
So we will be seeing reports in terms of the progress being made. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies. I understand, Councillor McEljohn, you had a second part to your question. I do apologise.
Convener, happy to come in on the second question, which was about the workplace entry, as it wasn't it, about the door entries, etc., and the security of buildings. So that has been a lot of work done. There's been various groups within the different buildings looking at security and safety and the practices. Changes have been made at reception areas to ensure that these are much tighter controlled in terms of who can gain entry to various buildings. There's been guidance given to staff, and they continue to be on the agendas of the various building groups to make sure that we keep on top of this.
Thank you, Karen. Does anyone else have anything to ask? No, I've got one question, if that's the case. It's the page 28, business continuity management, which, looking at the guidance here, hasn't been undertaken. Can I ask what the progress of this is and its current status? Because it is quite critical given severe weather.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Happy to come in on that. This is a little bit similar to our gender-based violence, where we've had a new team leader appointed last year to review all that we're doing in terms of business continuity and resilience. And we have been working with that team leader to review different practices. There are reports that are in draft form, which are due to come to corporate management team in the next quarter. And that will be looking at some changes that we want to make to improve performance in that area. But similar to gender and health and safety, we didn't want to provide a green level of assurance there until those reports have been considered and actions then implemented on the back of those. Thank you. Thank
you, Karen. My final point, and it basically does roll into it, is around counter-terrorism, because obviously counter-terrorism feeds into business continuity. Where are we on that, please? Counter-terrorism is being assessed as part of all of that work. It's part and parcel of the work we do on business continuity, but resilience management, incident management, so it will be included within the considerations for all of those papers. Thank you, Karen. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Forrest.
Thanks. Thank you, Convener. There is limited assurance on several areas, but one of them, sadly, is with services to Ukrainian refugees. Given that yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the invasion and the start of the Ukrainian people seeking refuge here, can you explain why and what is being done about this?
Karen, page 19.
Thank you, Convener. So the services to Ukrainian and the services to asylum seekers are organised by our same team. I would say that team are doing an excellent job in terms of supporting those individuals. There is, however, a significant amount of change in process and practice and in terms of the legislation governing how we manage those services and the arrangements we can make to support individuals. There's also changes in funding, etc. So because of all of that, that's why we are not comfortable giving that substantial assurance at this point in time. But I have to say that the team are doing an excellent job in managing through that, and we do get positive feedback from those that we are trying to support in those areas.
Thank you for that. Can I say that I know several families, and they speak so highly of the team. They really do. It was just when I saw that there was limited assurance, I thought I'd better ask. Thank you for that. And please pass on my thanks to the team.
Do we have any other questions? Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
And can we move on to our next item on the agenda, please, which is internal audit progress report. I believe that's yourself, Isabel.
Thanks, Convener, and good morning to everyone. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on where we are with completing our 24-25 internal audit plan. It also sets out the status of the remaining assignments to be completed from the 23-24 internal audit plan. Paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2 highlight the status with the assignments from the 23-24 plan, including the summary reported at the last committee in October. Paragraph 3.3 confirms that the 2 audit reviews have been finalised since then, which leaves only the 1 23-24 audit at draft report stage. The 24-25 internal audit plan was agreed by Audit Committee in April of last year. Paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5 set out the workload, including the other client work undertaken. Paragraph 3.4 also summarises what 24-25 audit reports have been completed, are in progress and are still to be started. A summary of progress relating to the 20 assignments areas as well as the remaining 23-24 audits can be seen at Appendix 1. Appendix 2 summarises the findings arising from the assignments that have been finalised via an internal audit report. I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 3.6, which provides committee with details on the number of duplicate creditor payments from July to December of last year. Action will now be taken to recover those overpayments. Paragraphs 4.1 to 4.4 explain the work undertaken in relation to the National Fraud Initiative. Finally, I'd ask members to note the recommendations and conclusions. That is, the team are making reasonable progress with finalising the remaining audit work in the 23-24 internal audit plan and also with completing the 24-25 internal audit plan. There are, however, some changes to the Clackmannanshire Council 24-25 internal audit plan, which may impact on the capacity at Falkirk, and so this plan must still be considered flexible. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meal, John?
Yes, Convener, I've got a couple of generic questions and I've got some questions in relation to the specific audits. So I don't know whether we maybe, if after the generic questions, we can maybe take the individual audits one by one. First of all, it's about the last statement there and the capacity, considering that there's an additional work that we've been asked to carry out by Clackmannanshire Council. Well, the team are now up to full speed, there's full capacity there. The impact on our audit process and having to give some additional time, is there an intention to look at some additional resource for that? I'm concerned that we don't get into a position where we continually fall back on our audit work, because there's actually some real good positive stuff starting to come out of that now that helps us drive improvements. So that would be my kind of first question.
Amanda?
Well, I think we're still sort of working our way through. I think we'd highlighted at the end of last year that we were looking at our resource and we were working our way through the arrangements, and that's still the case. We've been in negotiations and discussions with Clackmannanshire Council, particularly to have a look at what's sustainable for the year ahead, and so we're kind of still in the midst of doing that, but what we've recognised is that we will need to make some kind of change to the current arrangements to make them more sustainable, and Clackmannanshire Council.
Can I maybe ask that the Chief Executive maybe look at considering a potential different model going forward around that audit provision, because I'm just a wee bit concerned that we're just going to keep getting into a more and more difficult position with around our own resource and what we're delivering ourselves.
Thank you. Yes, we had quite an extensive discussion recently at the corporate management team just about how we make this relationship work, both for Clacks and for Falkirk, because the point made earlier about needing to maintain the integrity of our own audit program and not allowing that to be diminished or impacted by the work that we're doing for Clackmannanshire. So, as Amanda said, that really implies a different model going forward. So we've had a thorough discussion about this. Been some initial negotiations with Clackmannanshire, and that's still in play, but we're very conscious of the need to move on from the current position.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's helpful, and I think that the Audit Committee would be really interested to see how those develop in due course. If I can go into the first audit, the Madison one, Convener, or yeah, you can.
If I could just intervene very quickly. Could the income from work undertaken by club manager possibly be used to increase staffing resourcing? Because obviously I'm a lead auditor myself and I greatly appreciate the work they do, but I'm also concerned for staff resource and health.
Thank you, Convener. I think undoubtedly we can't continue with the same level of resource that we have. And so the discussions that we're having with client manager are about increasing the amount of resource that's available moving forward. The challenge that we have is that so much of the outputs from audit, which are around the audit plans, the progress reports, the annual governance statements, the year-end assurances, attendance at audit committee, all of these things all fall to Isabel in the main, with some support from one senior auditor across the two organisations. And so there's a real issue about the level of resource that's fallen on to both Isabel and to Sarah as well. And so we're recognising, just in what you were referring to earlier about the model, that's not sustainable and that can't continue. So it really needs to be a different staffing structure, and that would require a different level of resource. But we don't have a final agreed position yet.
Thank you, Amanda. Apologies, Councillor Meeker. John, your next question.
That's absolutely fine. I was moving on to the Madison Primary School report in relation to the 1 million overspend. I thank officers for the report. However, there may be aspects that are not particularly clear to myself. It's really about the reasons for the overspend. Is it really just the increased costs post-COVID? Are there any other reasons for that overspend?
Paul?
Through yourself, Chair. There is a culmination of aspects which I understand have led to the overspend. They are threefold. One is the increase in construction costs following COVID, and they weren't reflected in project updates. The second aspect was changes to the brief during the finalised design stage and the tender stage. And then the third part was actually changes to elements of the project scope and brief during construction. And that has led to increase in costs and delays in terms of time, which come with obviously additional costs and claims from the contractor. So they're the three main elements that I see it as an external person looking in on this.
Yeah, I thank you for that, and I appreciate that you joined the council after all of this was done, Paul. What I'm now looking at is how were members kept up to date with these changes and the reasons for it. And having now done a reflective view, it says that there are a number of there's further work required. I would really like to see a lessons learned and key actions just around the contract monitoring process. I think that would be helpful to actually have that somewhere quite clearly input, so that there's an element of recourse that we've learned from the process, so it doesn't happen again.
Chair, through yourself again, Chair. I think there is sort of two parts to the answer, and I'll start with the second part. There is now very robust processes in place for the management of works such as these, particularly around monthly monitoring, risk schedules, and the identification of any variances at an early stage to allow through our strategic asset modernisation board and then to elected members to provide those updates. In terms of the updates that were previously provided to elected members, there perhaps could have been more regular and frequent identification of those risks that could have come forward, but we've taken the recommendations of the audit report, and all have been accepted and all have been deployed if they weren't already being deployed over the past year.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back on the other reports in due course.
Thank you, Convener. It's just to add to what Mr Kettrick said, in the sense that you will see in the papers that we've also asked for a second phase of this audit work, and that's to follow up on the points that Mr Kettrick's just raised around making sure that if there are changes to design, etc., there are absolutely robust processes in place. Now, a lot of that has changed since this work was undertaken in Madison, as Paul has said. But we have asked for that second phase audit just to ensure that everything is as robust as it can be.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. It's just maybe a little more kind of digging into the answers we've had. I mean, it says in the report here, in the summary of the report, that there were a total of 15 recommendations, and Mr Kettrick's assured us that those are being implemented. Are we going to receive more detailed reports on this? Because I think I would be more assured if I knew what the recommendations are, how they're being implemented. It's fairly clear that either, at some stage, either at the initial assessing of the costs and the initial setting up of the contract, we're not getting it right, or we're not getting the monitoring right, or we're not getting the contract compliance process right. What are we doing to ensure that, and will we get further report on the detail of this?
Paul.
Chair, I think the appropriate time to do that as part of that second phase is to bring a report back to elected members highlighting the recommendations that were originally identified, what has been implemented, and then if there is anything else identified in that further audit that we could improve even further. I think that's where we would see that report coming back. So it would be part of the 25-26 audit plan.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Spears.
Oh, thanks. I'd just like to ask Isabel, have we overcome the staffing problems that you mentioned at our last meeting? That's my first question.
Thanks, Councillor Spears. The staffing problems in the sense of our capacity to do the extra work, is that what you mean?
Yeah, you spoke at length about it at the last meeting.
You'll see that we're 23-24 work is more or less completed now. We're in good shape for finalising the remaining audit that's to be done. So yes, our team capacity is good. You never want to preempt anything, but we are a small team. We have only 3 auditors and 1 senior auditor. So and we have quite a significant programme of work. But yeah, I think we're getting through all of that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Which leads me on to page 37, and it's the Bowness Recreation Centre draft report. I believe the Chief Executive has had a letter or an email from my colleague, Councillor Brian McCabe, the elected member for Denny, that I can read it to the committee this morning. I see that the report has only been issued in draft. Now, I believe there was assurances given in the October 24 meeting that this would be available and finalised for this meeting. So can we then say the committee requests a progress update of the internal audit team's investigation into safety concerns around the Bowness Recreation Centre swimming pool? The internal audit risk and corporate fraud management advised that this was underway and at draft report stage, which we believe it is. She explained that this has taken longer than anticipated due to the fact that some staff involved no longer work for the council. However, the final report was expected to be presented at the final report at the audit committee today. It's now a year since Councillor McCabe raised the concerns regarding the Recreation Centre pool report, and they still don't have the full facts. I am aware the draft report has been issued to a number of senior officers and the committee that it is the intent of finalising an internal audit report, and it was available back in October in draft form. So what he's asking is, when will we get the final report? There is still
Isabel,
concerns as to
could
why
you
the pool was
answer that
closed.
for him, please?
Sorry, I can't hear when you're speaking over me. Sorry, can you repeat it? I can't hear. It's always courteous to let the person finish speaking.
Okay, the Bowness Rec pool, that piece of work came in at the same time as the Madison piece of work, which we've just been speaking about. These are in addition to our work programme for the year. So they've had to be included and prioritised where we could do that. Madison has obviously come today, and to be honest, Bowness is not that far behind. When we discussed this in October, we were at draft report stage, that is correct, but it was still sitting within the team, the internal audit team, building the draft report, building up all of the accuracy of the information that was in there. The same points stand in that we have, it's been time consuming to get all of the pieces of information together and to build that picture. I think the last time I spoke about it being like pieces of a jigsaw, and that's very much still the case. The draft report has only gone out to senior managers in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and that is part of our normal process for an internal audit report. We are governed by internal audit standards that are mandated by SIPFA, and part of that is to send out draft reports and to check them for factual accuracy. That has happened now. The report is at a stage where we are agreeing recommendations. What has happened between October and now is the building of those recommendations, so that we're trying to make recommendations that are going to add value and improve the systems that are in place, so that something like this can't happen again. So those recommendations now, the report will be going back out again for agreement on the recommendations. And when I say agreement, that is to provide responsible owners for the recommendations and dates for implementation. Once that happens, which will happen in the next couple of weeks, the report will be issued as a final report, the same way any other audit report is dealt with within the team. And then it will come to the next audit committee in the same form as what you get the other information on all the other reports. It's basically what's in Appendix 2. So it's not that far away, but in terms of the other work that we've been doing, Madison was an additional piece of work, and it's just got there slightly quicker than Bowness. Hopefully that helps give a little bit of context around why it seems as if it's taken so long. Thanks, Councillor Spears.
No, I'll just fall back on my original question about your staffing problems previously. I'm glad they've been overcome, and we should get this full report and final report as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I have one point myself I'd wish to raise. Could I ask, why was there an absence of a lead project officer for the majority of this project's duration, given that's quite a crucial part of CDM 2015 regs? And how can we be assured that won't happen again?
So as part of the changes that have been made, both following the audit report, but actually had already occurred in advance, there is a requirement to have CDM coordinators, as you've quite rightly highlighted in terms of the Act, and the responsibilities for the effective project management at any major construction project. It's not even major, it just depends on the complexity and the contractors on site. We do have that in place.
Thank you. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a couple of questions in relation to the next audit, which is the fuel usage monitoring. A note within the report that a monitoring regime has been established to confirm the accuracy of the fuel transactions. I was just wondering why was that not happening previously? And why were managers not doing spot checks as part of just the overall governance of that?
Douglas?
Through yourself, convener. What I would say, Councillor Nico John, was there was systems in place, but through the good work that Audit carried out, it did pick up some areas of weakness. So the systems that have been put in place have now very much strengthened that position. What I would also add, in addition to that, we've kind of gone above and beyond, or we're about to go above and beyond the recommendations of the audit, and that we are looking to recruit an additional member of staff who will be, one of their key responsibilities will be to both monitor fuel usage and vehicle movements within and out with the council as well.
From that process, and this isn't specific just to this, is there a lessons learned about where there are financial transactions that are delegated to frontline staff? Is that something that we're looking at across the council, just to look to make it much more efficient and limit the ability for misuse? That's maybe something for either the Chief Exec or, I don't know, Karen.
Kenneth?
My apologies. Can I ask you to? I'm really struggling with the sound today. I think a number of other people are as well. So I didn't get all of that. So I'd really appreciate if you could just restate it. Apologies.
Absolutely. I'm glad it's not just me. I thought it was perhaps down this end, but it is very, very echoey, which means it feels as if at times it's mumbled. And I know people are doing their best here. It was looking at the monitoring regime. Is there lessons to be learned from this particular exercise that is going to be replicated elsewhere in the council, where there are staff at the front line will be carrying out potential financial transactions, whether it be through fuel or whatever, to ensure that we're getting best practice?
Karen?
Thank you, convener. Absolutely, that is something that we need to do with all audit reports where we give consideration of the recommendations that are flowing from these. So there are quarterly meetings with Isabel, Amanda and Colin and myself to look at any of these audit reports, look at the lessons learned that can then be applied across other areas of the council, and where appropriate, these reports are taken into corporate management team to ensure that we share those lessons learned and that we apply them to other areas. So in areas such as this, where it is spot checks of use of fuel, etc., there are definitely lessons that we can learn from that particular audit in terms of financial practices and how we do spot checks in other areas. That is also then helping to inform Isabel and the team about how we develop the future audit plans as well.
Thank you for that. That's all I've got on this particular item.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, convener. Can I ask, is the technology that we have at fault here, or the processes, or both? Because it does seem to me that modern technology and systems should enable us to have a fairly straightforward system of monitoring.
I think it's actually both, to be honest, Councillor Hannah. We have, again, as I've mentioned earlier on, through the good work of Audit, identified weaknesses in the system. They've obviously now been rectified. But in addition to that, through better use of technology, we have a far better governance over fuel usage and the tracking of vehicles than we have had previously.
Sorry, through you, convener, can I just check, is that you saying that the technology is as good as we could have, but we have to use it better?
The technology since the report has improved. We have a new tracking system in place, which wasn't in place at the time of the audit. So both the processes and the technology that we currently have now have improved.
Thank you. Thank you, convener.
Is there any other questions?
I'm sure
Councillor
you're aware I
Spears.
had my light on and it was asked to be turned off. But that's the second time it's happened today, and I'm sure you'll work on that. On page 38, we have the Legionella management arrangement follow-up, and it's not started. Can we have a full explanation as to why not? As there was a great deal of deliberation regarding this and the health and safety issues attached to it.
Isabel?
Yeah, no problem. The Legionella audit is on our 24-25 plan. It is one of those audits that is still to be started, you're correct. That's not to say it won't be started, it will be, but you'll be aware that the last paper on the agenda today is an update, a full update from the service on the Legionella recommendations and what stage they're at. The one thing from that is that the internal audit team will be undertaking another audit, and that should hopefully marry up with the information you're going to receive today on all of those recommendations. So the audit is still going to go ahead, but you'll see from the progress report that there has been a lot of audits undertaken already this year, including the additional ones, and we only have Legionella and one other to get started. So yeah, I can provide you the assurance that that will be starting in the next month or so, and that will hopefully marry up with the information that you're going to be receiving on the last item today. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Isabel.
You already stated there was no staffing problems. Can you tell me how you determined the level of importance on these? Because I would have thought the Legionella management arrangements was fairly important.
It is absolutely important, but so all of the items on our audit plan are risk-based, and they wouldn't be there if we didn't feel that they were important. So we do have a lot of juggling in our audit plan. We also have the capacity issues at Clacks Council, because we do an internal audit plan for there. But we are making good progress with our plan at Falkirk, and we do aim to get through those deferred audits. Thank you.
Obviously, we look forward to this regarding the concerns we had after COVID and the schools were closed. So can you give me a date when this is foreseen to be completed?
I can't give you a date for when it will be completed, but you will receive it back to Audit Committee. You will obviously be receiving an update on the last item of where all those recommendations are.
Thank you, Isabel. The next audit will actually follow on from our last agenda item then, is what you're confirming. Thank you. Does anyone else? Oh, Councillor Meikle, John.
Convener, I hope all members will remember that there's a code of conduct meeting this week, and remember to that they'd have to respect the chair. So if I can ask about the community benefits, I think that we do a great job, and we are very much a leader in respect of community benefits whenever we do go out to procurement, and it's something that we want to take forward. But at first sight, looking at this, we have what's agreed within our procurement, and then what we've actually delivered. And I'm just a wee bit anxious that we're maybe setting the bar too high, and it potentially looks as if we're falling short of what we've set for ourselves to be able to do. And I know that we're looking to do a review of that, and I just wondered whether consideration could be given to that, or if there is a clearer explanation as to why we're falling short in particular aspects of it, so that certainly to the public eye, that we are still delivering on something that is really good and really positive, and not actually failing on what we've set ourselves up to actually do.
Thank you. Ian, would you like to come in?
Thank you, convener. I think my appreciation has to be given to the audit team. I think I would like to express that at the beginning. I think we all do a lot of work on achieving community benefits and delivering community benefits. The dreaded C-COVID word was mentioned earlier on, and I think there was a recognition that over that period there was a drop-off in community benefits and delivery of things like apprenticeships and work experience. And I think that was probably natural over that period in the circumstances that were being encountered. But post that, we've been really keen to ensure that our council-wide procedures introduced, communicated, explained to all officers. And I think a lot of this audit report looked at these procedures and the recording and the dissemination and the understanding of these procedures. And it found that improvements could be made. So I completely embrace that. I think it's excellent to have the auditor's acute eye on the processes that we've been looking at. And there have been some really good suggestions around reporting into, for instance, the Strategic Asset Modernisation Group and so on, to ensure that there's clear oversight and a working group established to maintain oversight of what we have in contracts, what we're aspiring to get into contracts, and what we are subsequently delivering through these contracts. I think there are some really excellent suggestions here. So I come back to that point. I really welcome the auditor's eye on this, and I think there are always improvements that can be made, and that's certainly the aim over the upcoming period, to look carefully at these recommendations and do all we possibly can to implement them as effectively as possible. So I hope, convener, that's helped to answer the question.
Thank you. Councillor Meikle-John.
It's kind of answered the question, but what it's not said, what it's not given me is that these improvements will then help to deliver what we had agreed, or what we had agreed as our criteria, or what our aspiration, or we maybe need to say what's agreed, it's an aspiration, as opposed to something that we will look to measure ourselves against actually delivering on. So I think there's maybe a bit of narrative around that, because, as I say, at first look, it looks as if we've fallen short on a number of areas of the community benefits that we've not delivered on. Therefore, that will the improvements help to deliver the better outcomes we're looking for, or are we still going to see in the next audit this disparity? That's what I'm looking for. Sorry, I'm being quite pedantic. I appreciate that.
Ian.
No, thank you, convener, and thank you for the question, Councillor Meikle-John. I completely accept what you're saying. I think what we're looking at is a real tightening up from beginning to end of process. So it's looking at what are we actually getting into contracts, and how are we contract managing through the contract's life. How are we engaging with the contractors, and then I think quite importantly recording the benefits that we're receiving and completely understanding these benefits. I think in a broader sense, and it's perhaps not entirely captured by this, but I think there's better council-wide working now taking place across services with the communities team. And also the employment training unit, so that these good connections, I think, will help to drive things from beginning of process to end of process, and ultimately the reporting out of hopefully good benefits for our communities. Thank you, convener.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. Can I just first of all ask, this is in relation to 42 contracts awarded between April 22 and March 23. What was the total value of those 42 contracts? Or is that not something you've got off the top of your
Thank you,
head?
Councillor Hannah. It's not unfortunately something I've got off the top of my head. What I could say though is that there is a real focus in our council's significant projects. So there is a real focus in our higher value projects that can drive out real benefits and things like modern apprenticeships. So you're looking at duration of contracts and value of contracts to drive out the benefits. But what I could do is feed that back. Councillor Hannah, if you're happy for me to bring that information forward to the members of the committee.
Thank you. I mean, it does seem to me, I don't think that the aspirations in terms of the community benefits agreed in the contracts were particularly ambitious. So it does seem to me to be a major concern that the managed contract, because these are contracts, and therefore the community benefits are not just a wish list. It is part of the contract. Therefore, we have to be ensuring contract compliance. That is what's key to this. And I would like to see something more than improvements are needed in management arrangements. I think we need something quite robust in terms of contract compliance. Can you give me a bit better insight into how the robustness of that contract compliance activity?
Thanks, Councillor Hannah. I think you're right, contract management is very important through these processes. So it's important that we have introduced a process which brings in expectations of regular meetings with the contractors, tracking, making sure that they understand triggers for community benefit outcomes, that we're tracking through contract management meeting, the delivery of them, and we are recording them. And ultimately, it may well be that we need to take enforcement action if there are difficulties under the contract. So we've looked at that in terms of the process that's being communicated to officers across the council. Thank you, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. That takes me to the third part, which is, are we articulating clearly that there will be penalties in the event of non-contract compliance?
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Where the contract would provide for penalties, then of course, yes, we would look at that as an enforcement point. So I think that's an important point that you've raised there. There are points that you would look throughout the course of a contract to escalation through, so you would hope that you didn't end up needing to look at that sort of approach. But where penalties may be available, then of course that would be looked at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Does anyone else have any questions? No. I have one and a request, Ian. Would it be possible to provide the committee with a progress report so we can see how your improvements are progressing? And secondly, you know where I'm coming from this one, I hope. Where does Scotland Excel fit into this?
Thank you, Convener Councillor Anslow. Yes, I would be happy to provide a feedback report on progress. There were dates that were agreed through the audit report itself, and we'll look at them, and I'll speak with Isabel about appropriate timing there. Scotland Excel typically, because they have frameworks which involve a lot of different users of the framework and lots of different suppliers, typically have a points-based system for the allocation of community benefits. And that's something that the audit report covers. And indeed, it's my corporate procurement unit team that are developing a very careful process to regulate how we're looking at the points that we've accrued and how they can be brought through and utilised for the benefits of the communities. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Ian. Is there any more questions? Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Sorry, Convener, just before you do agree that, I think the committee had asked for two reports in request to this. One was on Madison and one was on the community benefits. Did I pick that up correctly?
Yes,
That's correct.
that's correct.
In that case, then, can we move on to item 7? And I believe it's back to yourself, Isabel.
Yes, thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the work of the corporate fraud team in 24-25 up to the 31st of December, including an updated corporate fraud action plan. Paragraph 4.2 explains that the last report submitted to the committee was in June of last year, which provided an update on performance and a summary of work undertaken over the full year. Appendix 1 provides committee with the corporate fraud team activity up until the 31st of December 24. Paragraphs 5.4 and 5.5 set out improvements and progress with the corporate fraud action plan. Progress will continue to be reported twice yearly as part of these updates, and the detail on that can be seen at Appendix 2. I'd finally draw your attention to the recommendations at paragraph 2.1, which are to consider fraud-related performance and the summary of work undertaken within the corporate fraud team during 24-25, and to note progress with the corporate fraud action plan, which has been updated for 24-25. Thank you. Happy for any questions.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. I think we should put on record our thanks for the work that's been done by the corporate fraud team. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's really important. And noting that there has been an increase in referrals should be seen as a positive thing, and that people are comfortable reporting, and it does allow us to be able to make sure that we follow that through and protect the council from various levels of fraud. The one thing that stood out for me, though, Convener, is that the estimated loss to the public purse due to tenancy fraud, 78,000 per property is recovered. I wonder if we have someone from housing that could perhaps maybe give a bit of an explanation around that. And I do wonder if perhaps at some point members could be given a briefing to have a better understanding to quantify that, to how many properties that relates to, and therefore how big of an issue it actually is and what's been done about it.
Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. And just to clarify, the 78,000 is the national figure across Scotland rather than a local figure, which I hope gives you a little bit of reassurance.
Yes.
However, it is an important issue, and it's one that the team are increasingly working on, and we now have very good working relationships with our fraud team, who are working closely with our housing team to make sure that we tackle any sort of tenancy fraud. Now, the example that's in the report is only one type of example of tenancy fraud where a property was sublet, but there are various lessons that we've learned from that particular incident, where we've now made some changes to our structures, how we allocate properties to ensure that the same housing officer is doing the ID checks, as is going out with tenants, as is doing the visits, and making sure it's the same person who is in that property, for example. So they do a follow-up visit to make sure there's a settling in visit and a further visit thereafter. So we're trying to make sure that the same housing officers are doing all of that, which helps to reduce. It doesn't completely negate against tenancy fraud, but it helps to reduce tenancy fraud. There are various other checks that we can also do, but that's where we're working very closely with our fraud team to make sure that we're on top of this. We're also keeping a check on things like the national report and some of the lessons that's been learned across Scotland to make sure that we take them into our own practices as well. But happy to get a short briefing note prepared for members on that, if that would be of help.
I think that would be helpful to have a better understanding, because my next question is actually related probably to the table in 4.1. And where we've had the number of cases, the number of referrals, and cases investigated, one ongoing, one closed. We don't, what is not said is where there was fraud found. And I also think it'd be helpful to be able to quantify that in a figure, so that we know the magnitude of what we're talking about, and that it could be very low level fraud, not that that's acceptable, but where we have larger sums, I think that just knowing the areas that may well be in, but I think it'd just be helpful to have an understanding how many of those cases actually were found as fraud having been committed.
Thanks, Convener. Yep, happy to build that into any briefing notes and to look at that sort of data. And on the other areas of fraud, I'm presuming Isabel will do the same within her team to see if there's any high-level cases that members need to be aware of in those as well.
Thank you.
Does anyone else? Councillor Hannah?
If that particular item on the report is done, I was just wanted to say, I mean, the audit earlier identified a spend of £1.3 million on fuel, and set out a number of recommendations. Could the committee ask for a report on the recommendations in the action plan in terms of the progress to be provided to the committee?
Douglas?
Yeah, absolutely no issues with that at all. Happy to carry that out.
And I suppose the final point is, again, given the increased demand for investigations, are there adequate resources allocated to the corporate fraud team?
Amanda?
I think, again, this is something that we're picking up as part of the work that we're doing with CLACS to look at what would a fully resourced staff section look like, and that includes Client Manager Council. At the moment, we don't do the fraud, we don't provide support for fraud as such in terms of the joint working agreement, albeit Isabel does provide support, but we're looking at what would the team need to look like and be, what level of resource would be required to provide a sort of excellent service across the two. As Isabel said, it's a very small team at the moment in Falkirk, and they do a huge amount of work, and they, I'm sure members saw a lot of the work that happened during Fraud Awareness Week, and it generated a lot of interest. Now, that some people may say that it's a success because it generated the interest, and I think that's how we would look at it, albeit we don't want fraud to be taking place, but the sooner we know about it and that it's identified, the better. So I think it would always be great to have more resource in these kind of areas, but we have to recognise, obviously, the constraints that we're operating in. So it's a bit of a ramble, but yeah, we're picking that up as part of the discussions and negotiations we're having with Client Manager Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Spears.
Thank you. Can you tell me how tenancy fraud is being recovered?
Karen?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Spears, for your question. I'm not quite sure what particular tenancy fraud you're speaking about. So if it was the sublet situation that's actually in the report, then we did take action to recover monies from the individual who was subletting the property, and that has been done.
Well, it says here the report notes that the estimated loss to the public purse due to tenancy fraud is £78,300 per property recovered.
Thank you, Convener. Convener, as previously mentioned, that figure is a national figure. It's not a Falkirk figure. And there is work that's been done, as noted earlier as well. You will note in the report at the table at page 58 that there were 9 cases of referrals relating to non-residents of tenants. So we are looking at these cases, and we've agreed that we'll do a briefing note for members on that particular matter.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions on this subject? Councillor Forrest.
Just one quick one, please. The report notes that the number of new whistleblowing referrals increased by 250%. That sounds horrendous. But it's got to be applauded because people are comfortable coming forward. Unfortunately, you're bound to have found that some are spurious accusations. Can you give us an idea of, if there are, how many and how much time was actually taken to find out that they were false? Thanks.
I'll just come in, yeah. Yes. The number of referrals we get in, yes, sometimes there can be a malicious element to it, vexatious element. So we have a procedure in place for every referral that comes in where we will assess and maybe have a first look at the information that has been given to assess whether or not it looks like there's anything in it. So we're looking for as much evidence as possible when we get some of these referrals in to try and confirm what it's saying. So the corporate fraud team are very experienced in this and have a look at everything that comes in to determine that. And part of that may be an initial investigation just to find out what we can get. It comes in peaks and troughs. Corporate fraud team is very much a supply and demand issue because, as Amanda said earlier, the Awareness Week generated quite a lot of demand and we only have the same supply. So it's looking at each on its own merits at the time. I don't have a figure off the top of my head as to how many of our referrals, but I can certainly get that for you. We can look at the number of referrals that have come in, say, in the last year, and how many of them we assessed as being not able to do any further work on it. And it could be because there's a lack of evidence or we just can't get back in touch with the whistleblower to gain any more information. So I can pull something together on that for you if you would like.
It was just if you had it. I wouldn't want you to waste any time on that. It was just, I thought I've had accusations made in the past towards staff, and I know how annoying it can be. You spend ages and ages investigating it only to find out that it's completely untrue. But thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. If you could maybe circulate that report to all committee members, I'd be appreciated. I don't have any questions, but I'm going to, unless there's any other questions from anyone else, I just have a final comment on this particular report. Basically, thank you very much for the report. I appreciate the dual role you do, being a qualified lead auditor myself. I know it can be an arduous task. Very much positive. My only negative for me is the impact on your staff. I know Audit Scotland was looking at separating the two roles at one point, so I'm pleased that this council's actually looking at the possibility. And just thank you for your good work. Is there any further questions? Do we agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Brian.
Just before you formally agree it though, I think you did ask for some work, so just so we can capture in the minute, we asked for a briefing note on tenancy and a report back on the internal audit recommendations and the action plan and timescales on the fuel, which Douglas said he would provide. And then at the end, Isabel mentioned that she would do, just by way of an email, a note round about the number of fraud allegations and how many were progressed. So it's the actions arising from this item.
Thank you, Brian. We all good with that?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you, Convener. The report that's presented today is an update to Audit Committee on the actions undertaken following the original internal audit report of June 2023 and subsequent updates that have been provided, including in October 2024, when further information in relation to action dates and completion dates was requested. Thus, this report provides the updates and an officer's view satisfies the committee's request. As outlined in the report, priority actions have been progressed and completed, and in many instances, additional activities, as noted, exceed the basic requirements of the original audit report. The ongoing activity and actions ensure that the Council has and continues to have a comprehensive and robust approach to the management of water quality within its operational property assets. Without going through the report in detail, there has been a number of notable strategic actions completed that continue to be applied, and these include the establishment of a property compliance working group, the establishment of a property compliance team, and I have with me today Thomas Law, who is our compliance officer for Legionella, and our newly appointed property compliance manager, who will be taking up post on the 7th of April, which is Michael Durrington. In addition, we have undertaken logbook reviews, which have been completed for all schools and priority establishments, and there is an ongoing audit process in place covering all properties. At a premises level, we have Legionella risk assessments and action plans, which are now recorded on the EvoTix Assure system for monitoring and progress and reporting. And all risk assessments have been undertaken for 257 properties, with 210 of those subsequently being refreshed, and assessments undertaken as part of the biennial cycle, which has now been implemented. This covers all risk levels of building. The Council uses an external contractor to undertake the risk assessments, and all actions that are identified in risk assessments are recorded from identification through to completion. There is a robust Legionella contract management regime in place through the Legionella Compliance Officer in conjunction with maintenance and building officers who manage the contract and supervise the undertaking of the risk assessments and works being undertaken. There is Legionella training, which is an online training course, and there is also face-to-face training undertaken where required, which outlines all staff with property responsibilities, including premises managers, head teachers, caretakers and janitors. Completions of this course are monitored and reported via the Property Compliance Working Group. This training is mandatory for all premises managers. There is thermocouples and thermometers, which are appropriately calibrated and are supplied to all properties on a risk-based approach. All health and social care partnership residential care properties, for instance, in sports venues and primary schools, have been provided with the equipment, and training in the use of this is provided to relevant site staff. These actions cover the majority of the main risks identified in the recommendations of the audit report. Specific responses and confirmation of completion of audit actions within the original action dates and completion dates is provided in Appendix 1, together with the relevant commentary. It's important to note that some actions will always remain ongoing. For instance, with premises managers changing regularly as staff leave and roles change, records are continually updated and training is provided at that point. One of the requests was to note lessons learned in actions section, and section 5.7 highlights a number of key considerations and in summary recognises that organisationally the management of water quality Legionella was inconsistent and not sufficient. Through the implementation of the actions identified in the audit and the further management activities that have been undertaken, together with the recruitment of appropriate qualified and experienced staff, the Council is meeting its legal requirements and is effectively managing risks associated with water quality and Legionella. Myself and colleagues are happy to take any questions. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. It's not really a question, it's just a very brief comment, just to thank the huge amount of work the officers have done on this. I think the report before us is very comprehensive, and I do really welcome the recommendations and the lessons learned. I hesitate to say, but potentially this is the sort of report that we'd like to see in future with those sections. Perhaps it's maybe not as extensive, but the principle's the same of actually having some clear lessons learned. And I think as a public report, this will provide a public assurance that we've taken this particular issue on board, we've dealt with it very effectively, and we now have a good process of safeguarding our public buildings in place. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. I would reiterate that I know there's been a huge amount of work done by the people involved in this, and this is an excellent report. It has taken a considerable amount of time to get here, and it would be useful if we could have just some explanation of how that has come about. And the other thing I would like to ask is, given that we are undertaking community asset transfers of a number of buildings, are we ensuring that the groups taking over those buildings are given the same sort of guidance? Because although we are no longer responsible for the buildings, we still have some responsibilities for the communities.
Paul.
So I'll start with the second question first. In my usual style, we've provided all community groups who are going through the asset transfer process at an early stage the premises manager handbook that the council adopts. It's up to them whether or not they would want to adopt it. We would always recommend, though, that they should adopt something similar wherever possible, in which case then they'll be adopting a similar robust framework for the management of the Legionella and water quality. On the first part of the question, the time that it has taken, multiple reasons. One is staff and the recruitment of staff, experienced and competent staff, establishing the systems in place to record actions and managing them through. You'll recollect from the previous updates, we were appointing new contractors or contractors for both the risk assessments and the undertaking of works. And then we've undertaken the rollout of the training, which has had to be undertaken by all premises managers. So in addition to that, together with things like the audits that were required to be undertaken, these things all take time. And, you know, as is mentioned earlier, it's a bit of a jigsaw to put it all together, but we now believe that we're in a position where that exercise is now complete, and we're in a very good position in terms of our compliance.
Councillor.
Thank you for that, and thank you again to all the staff for all their hard work on this one. Thank you, Convener.
Councillor Spears.
Sorry. Oh, thanks. On page 69, 8.3, in addition, a range of wider property compliance improvement activities. Can I ask you what these wider properties are?
So throughout the whole of the report, you'll see there is the original recommendations that are made in terms of actions that came out of the audit. We've undertaken, as we've highlighted in the report, and they're throughout the action plan where we've undertaken additional activities. And I'm just going to find where some of these are, such as the Legionella compliance officer engaging with premises managers. That's not just about engagement, providing guidance. They're also providing training, they're providing support to ensure that happens. So if it was just a case of engagement, this is your requirements, there's the premises manager handbook, we go far beyond that. And Thomas will advocate that, you know, he has been engaging with a lot of premises managers on a one-to-one basis to ensure that
that was Councillor Hannah's question, was it not?
What the additional actions are that we're undertaking, and that's what those additional actions are.
Now, I understand we're going to be doing training courses, especially for people who are taking over assets that have been put up for sale or lease. Is there a difference between how they need to comply under sale or lease?
Convener, through yourself, the short answer is no. The legal obligations sit with the person in control of the premises, and the responsibility is the same in both circumstances.
Will this be extended to any premises where the council gives licences?
Again, it's back to the person in control of the premises. They are responsible for the ongoing management, maintenance and statutory compliance for that property, which would include Legionella. What I will say is at the point of transfer, all buildings are statutorily compliant and wind and watertight.
The concern is if we give a licence to a premise, it says that the premise is compliant with a lot of different stuff. And I think that under 7.4 is the legal implication. Do we check that the Legionella has been tested for in any other licensed premises?
The convener, the short answer is once the property transfers, the legal obligation on the council to do that transfers to the person in control of the premises. We are not responsible for going back and doing that. So the answer would be no, we do not do that as a matter of course.
Fine, thank you.
Is there any other questions? I have no questions, Paul, but I just want to say thank you. It has been a long process. I appreciate the time taken, both with myself out with this committee and everything. It's a really good report. I would suggest that going forward, the next one could be along those lines and would remove any rough road ahead. And thank you very much to your team, particularly Thomas and Michael, as performing the Legionella inspections and getting the guidance books up to date. Thank you. Do we agree the report?
Agreed.
Then I'm quite happy if everyone, unless there's anything else, I'm quite happy to close this meeting. Thank you.